I like the symbolism of Christ in the Old Testament, especially after they left Egypt on their way to Canaan. They walked through the desert for 40 years. And how do you quench the thirst of 2 million people? But God is superfluous. He can quench our thirst. So Moses had to speak to the rock, and then the water started to gushing out. The first time we have it at Mara. When they got to Mara, the water was bitter. So what happened? The Lord said, put a tree into the water. When you put the tree of Calvary into your bitter experiences, it becomes sweet. There are so many precious lessons. At Rephidim, he had to strike the rock, and the rock produced water. But this was only the beginning of the journey. Throughout the journey, there were rocks to supply water. And throughout our journey in life, Christ the rock is there. If we speak to Him, the water of satisfaction, deep satisfaction, will flow from His soul into our hearts. And this is one of those places, and this is called Wadi Musa, the little rivulet of Moses. This is where, according to local tradition, he also struck the rock, and the water is still flowing. Christ, you can never exhaust Him. The supply is bigger than the demand. You just come to Him with your thirst for forgiveness, your thirst for peace, and you can quench your soul. So to me, this is a very special place in Petra, because I see Christ in the symbolism of the water. It's pure, it's constant, it hasn't stopped flowing since 3,500 years ago. His grace never stops flowing. It's always fresh. It's always ready to cool us and to quench our thirst. So this is the story of Wadi Musa and Jesus Christ. It is easier to learn something than to unlearn something. Did you get the message? And for God to help us to unlearn certain things, He takes us to the desert. Moses had to unlearn a few things, and God had to take him to the desert. And many of the Bible characters first went to the desert to unlearn certain things before God could have used them. Now, you're looking at this vast desert. Something marvelous happened here. Early every morning, this was white with manna. The greatest lesson that Israel had to learn in their journey from Egypt to Canaan was the lesson of dependence. Self-reliance is the most difficult thing to unlearn. And in salvation, we have to unlearn self-reliance. Salvation by effort. And this is one of the great messages of the desert. You're absolute in the hands of God. You have situations which you cannot handle, where you only have to trust God. So if you're in a desert right now, God is teaching you the greatest of all lessons, the lessons of please depend upon me for your food. Now the manna was a symbol of Christ. Every morning He comes to the sinner and He spreads His grace around us. And He says to the sinner, come and eat. Come and eat of myself. But you've got to do it in a limited time, because as the sun rose, the manna disappeared. And it's impossible to keep yesterday's manna for today. Christ wants to be a new experience to us every single day. Please don't forget to collect your manna every day, to take you through the desert. And remember, God wants to do for you what you cannot do for yourself. And this is touching your pride. Somebody said, justification by faith is God's work of laying man's glory in the dust and doing for man what man cannot do for himself. We're on our way to Canaan. Let's depend on the manna. And of course, the water will also be there. The basics will always be there. You may become disappointed if you expect more than water and manna. Can you see the man coming here? He is a prince from Egypt. He fled from fame to shame. They used to call him Happy Moses. Happy is the name of the Nile. So Hatshepsut found him in the Nile. She said, Happy Moses, he came out of the Nile. They were worshipping the Nile. And then Moses made a mess of his life. God delivers people through grace. He wanted to deliver the people through force. So he fled from fame to shame. This is also called Midian, another name for Sinai. And for 40 years, Moses had to unlearn what he learned in Egypt in 40 years. He came to the University of Patience, the University of full dependence upon God. And here he met his father-in-law, and of course, here he met Zipporah, his wife. Now, from ancient times, people excavated for copper. At Serbit el-Qadim, in the Sinai Peninsula, they found copper, and that's why they worship Hathor, the goddess of the desert. And here we also visited a Hathor temple, the goddess of the desert. And Moses discovered God anew in his shame. And for 40 years, he learned lessons of patience. God has got a plan for us, taking us to the deserts of life, to unlearn certain things and to learn total dependence upon God. So Solomon, who had to look after about 1,000 women, came here and he mined for copper. He found it here and then he exported it from Eilat, where we slept last night. So this is quite a famous place. And as we travel back, we're going to look at the mushroom, where you can actually see the way they mined copper. It's interesting. And then after 40 years, Moses saw a burning bush, a bush that didn't burn out. And God said to him, take off your shoes, this is holy ground. He said, Moses, I want you to go back. Moses said, I've lost all confidence. And this is the person that God really can use. Somebody without confidence, only confiding and trusting in God. So the first 40 years, Moses learned to become somebody. The next 40 years, he learned to become a nobody. The last 40 years, God showed the world what he can do with somebody who became a nobody. So if you're in the desert of nobodiness, God has got a plan for you. The last part of your life, God wants to be the best. The sunset years may be the best of your life, better than the sunrise years. And it's a wonderful privilege to be here. Of course, Israel was led through this area, and every morning they woke up and they saw little white grains of sand. They ate it and they were fed. In the desert of life, Christ is still there. Just pick him up and eat him, assimilate him to your body, and you'll have strength to carry on through the desert. By the way, Elijah also was fed from heavenly food, and he walked for 40 days and 40 nights from Beersheba until Mount Sinai. Make use of the manna. And of course, during the day it was cool, moisturous, because this pillar of cloud went up many, many k's, making a huge shadow and leading the people from Egypt to Canaan. And at night it's cool. That same pillar changed into a lovely warm fire. God is our shade, God is our heat. A beautiful symbolism of Christ. That pillar of cloud by night and cloud of shade by day. May God bless you on your way from Egypt to Canaan. He will not desert you. He will be there for you in prosperity and adversity. And now we're going to look at the arches to just see the beauty of this area. Are you waiting for God to fulfill a promise? He's got His own timing. Let me tell you about the inscriptions here at Timna Valley and also at Serbit el-Kadim in the Sinai. 150 years before the Bible was written in ancient Hebrew, 2 alphabets were discovered, one at Ugarit in Syria and one here in Sinai. So when Moses wrote the Bible, there was an alphabet, just in time. But the science of archaeology is just progressing and progressing and progressing. They've discovered that there is a relationship between Proto-Sinaitic script, which we find here, and Proto-Arabic script, which we find in Armenia. And as I watched these inscriptions, I saw little men like this. Now in Proto-Sinaitic script, this is the soft ach sound. The little snake is the N, and where you have a V with a dot in the middle, that's the O. So when I was up at Ucht Asar, I saw in alphabetic language, Proto-Arabic, Proto-Sinaitic, the name of Noah. So the inscriptions are revealing the truth of the Bible. At the right time, the alphabet was there, and Moses could write the Bible. At the right time, God will come to you and reveal in His letters of love His plan for your life. It's exciting to be in this area. God preserved the writings for millennia so that we can enjoy it. And what we saw here is what Moses read when he came here. Because Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. He could read hieroglyphics. I think he could read cuneiform and maybe Hittite hieroglyphics. He was a great man who became a small man and then a great man again. May God help us to be humble in our experiences of disappointments and experiences of deserts.